as the homeless are driven from the most visible parts of the county first, from the parks, and then from the streets.
That was the resource I offered you.
And finally, from the freeway embankments and the rail line easements that crisscross the county, their belongings are being bulldozed and trashed, in many cases leaving them with nothing all over again. Orange County sheriffs and local PD are wielding a heavy hammer these days out here on the streets of Orange County, utilizing new anti-camping ordinances to further criminalize the homeless out here and reducing them essentially to three options. Entry into the new mass shelter system here in Orange County, into the jails, or placement in psychiatric management. Now, each of these options burdens the homeless with additional layers of hardship and dubious outcomes they may not have desired and which may even further traumatize them. Some of them will attempt to enter the shelter system reluctantly as a last best option perhaps. Few of them will benefit from the experience. First, there was the converted open-air bus terminal in Santa Ana with the deceptively disarming name, the Courtyard, and its quaint outdoor toilet facilities for 400-plus homeless crammed into a dark and dank bus terminal. Stifling hot in the summer and cold in the winter. That's before the wind begins to blow. And then, in the summer of 2017, came a 200-bed military-style converted warehouse off the 91 freeway called Bridges at Kramer Place, hailed by county officials as a model for all future shelters in Orange County. Homeless residents there disaffectionately call it the barracks. Beds stacked too high, one after another, very little area for storage. Medical attention almost non-existent, pat-down inspections, and 24-hour surveillance everywhere. Among its many incomprehensible regulations are the restrictions against outside visitors, any kind of photography, or even a curtain for privacy. Most residents say, for all intents and purposes, it is incarceration. In December of 2018, the city of Anaheim rushed into service another converted industrial warehouse shelter, Anaheim Way, based on the Bridges at Kramer model. Again, capacity 200, officials at the time affectionately referred to it as the Christmas miracle.
Tonight, we have the opportunity to showcase a Christmas miracle.
So named for its rapid shelter conversion in only 18 days. Perhaps a little too rapid in hindsight, because it never did quite resolve its less than miraculous maintenance and indoor plumbing issues, code violations, and staffing problems. At one point, the entire security staff walked out in protest of the unhealthful and toxic conditions there. Anaheim Way began with high hopes and earnest efforts of many who wanted this place to be a showcase of tolerance and comfort for the shell-shocked homeless coming in off the streets. Its operator, the Illumination Foundation, is well known across Orange County as a successful small-scale transitional housing provider. Anaheim Way was its first foray into a large-scale mass shelter. It seemed like everybody wanted it to work.
Nick, come here a second. Take a picture.
But that sense of optimism and promise would be short-lived at Anaheim Way. as the place began to fill up with the shell-shocked and sleep-deprived homeless coming in off the streets. The sheer numbers and complexity of homeless issues compressed into one building began to tax this hastily assembled shelter and poorly trained staff, ill-prepared and ill-equipped for such a large number of clients under one roof. The so-called Christmas miracle, fast-tracked by the city of Anaheim, was about to get a reality check, as the same pernicious problems that plagued the mass shelters of Kramer Place and Courtyard began to overtake the best intentions of Anaheim Way. A place of rest, a welcoming experience as operations manager for Anaheim Way, Jeff Negri offers in the early days of its service.
Clients, and I think the staff is also very much committed to just making this a good experience. We have our beautiful tree, it's the spirit of Christmas, it's a new year, and so we're really trying to be very welcoming to everybody because we want people to be here. We've had a few complaints, but not too many. For the most part, everybody's happy.
Okay, talking to Tony. Tony C. was one of the first to come to Anaheim Way. He'd been through the other mass shelters already. And even early on, he could see this shelter sliding into the same mistakes as the other big shelters he'd seen.
Do you have access to your lawyers, to your advocates? Can they come in here and talk to you? Have they yet?
No, they do not have access. About two days ago, I know Heidi wanted to come in and visit, and they did not have a visiting policy. I personally think they, for some reason, are struggling or with the intake or how they're managing this place, because sometimes it's heavy-handed, that they haven't got to what they're really supposed to do as a group. Provide services and information to help us move to the next level. Individually, now, they've got untrained people as far as dealing with people with mental health issues, or dealing with people that have been on the street and are just don't need that pressure of undue pressure where you're acting like you're their babysitter. Yeah. I think there's some staff in here that have been in other facilities that should not be working here. One thing that's an inherent problem with any value-added, I call this a value-added service provider, or one of these women's homes, is that you need to differentiate yourself, that you need to be unbiased. You don't need to appear to be on women, or just you got to be neutral, and they need a little more communication skills or bedside manner, for lack of a better term, and they do need training because they got some bad apples. You know what I mean?
Yeah. You were at Courtyard, you said earlier.
2 days after talking with Tony C. at Anaheim Way, he was evicted, exited, as they say, to the streets for using his own computer to research his court case. He would be only the first of many.
Nothing matters as you walk the street. No one listens when you try to speak. No one's there to keep you warm. No one's there to pull you from the storm. Little whiskey numbs the pain. Too many memories.
Let me go ahead and show you how many people we got here at Santiago Creek.
Another refugee from the riverbed, the Maxwell Park roll-ups, and from a stay at Anaheim Way is Michelle, a fearless advocate for her community, the homeless community. She's paid a heavy price for it, and for her outspoken criticism of the mass shelters of Orange County.
And that's the thing is they crammed us into this building for one reason alone, to satisfy a federal court judge. They didn't do it for us. They didn't do it to help the homeless people. They didn't do it out of compassion. They did it because they were forced to. And they were given a time frame which they maxed out.
Michelle was also exited from Anaheim Way for calling attention to indoor contamination, Fecal waste on the open floor of the warehouse, left uncorrected until county officials finally shut the toilets down and forced all toilet facilities outside.
Inside. When they were semi-working, there was no hot water for the showers. We've had, since the place has opened, we've had the porta potties backing up inside. So they're inside. I think that's probably the problem that I'm having, is that smell is everywhere on the inside. We're not expecting, 5-star rating. Okay, we're not expecting, we didn't actually expect anything. We were told that if we didn't go to the shelter, we'd be going to jail. So we all went because we don't want to go to jail. Whatever.
Buffy was one of the last to leave the streets of Anaheim during that city's park roll-ups in December. And like many others, given the choice of shelter or jail, she finally surrendered to the confines of a mass shelter. She landed at Anaheim Way on her feet and at least out of the rain, but in many ways in the very shadow of Anaheim Stadium and new luxury apartments all around looking down at them. Buffy.
Yes.
You and I have met before. Out at Maxwell Park. Do you remember our conversation in the rain?
Probably the same one we're about to have right now. And not much has changed except that it's not raining right now, and the location has changed, and the bill has gotten bigger.
Yeah. Well, at least
Yes.
we're not wet.
No, we're not.
Okay. So that was probably a low point for you and me out there at Maxwell Park the last day when they pulled in at 4 a.m. and rolled everybody up.
They got paid $500,000 just to be there, but we'll edit that part out.
Okay. So the service management of the Illumination Foundation.
Mm-hmm.
How's it going?
I don't know. I really don't know. But having us in here, like, it makes people sad. It makes them sad, And all my friends out here, I've not really seen them smile like I did even living in a tent. And that's what I miss. Even though we were in a tent, we were smiling, and we were, together as a family. And right now, it's just like we're still family, but we, I don't know why we have to be caged in and like we're something that we're just people. That life happened, and it could happen to anybody at any time. That's all, And I sure don't want to tell somebody that they can't use the restroom.
What began as a Christmas miracle ended mercifully shuttered just 3 months later. All the remaining residents of Anaheim Way shuffled off to other mass shelters. No one was held accountable for this ill-conceived and poorly executed pop-up warehouse shelter for 200. No one wants to remember a train wreck, but there are reasons we should not look away. Because the mass shelter that Anaheim Way was modeled after, Bridges at Kramer Place in North Anaheim, lives on. The mega warehouse shelter that then County Supervisor Todd Spitzer in the summer of 2018 called the model for all new shelters in Orange County.
So to answer your question, this can and will be the model, and so far, knock on wood,
Yeah, it does.
knock on wood, it's going to be a shining example of what can happen for Orange County.
Are you hopeful that
The wood that Todd Spitzer is knocking on these days to deliver his model shelter for Orange County is this man, Larry Haynes, and his county-wide homeless services organization, Mercy House, the largest shelter operation by far to contract with the county. And Bridges at Kramer is their largest shelter project to date, CEO Haynes says, and the one he and the county want desperately to succeed and proliferate elsewhere.
Exactly right. The job of Bridges is to get people in, get them processed, get them assessed, determine what the best housing referral is, whether it's a rapid rehousing program, whether it's a family reunification, or to place somebody in permanent supportive housing. And to that extent, it is doing exactly what it's supposed to do. It is sort of a point guard, if you will, to the rest of the system. And the rest of the system are the folks that then finish the scoring and getting them placed into housing. Now, we currently, there is a bottleneck, but there are a wide variety of reasons for that. This isn't a shocking thing to know that
It all sounds pretty efficient, systematic, almost industrialized. But people are not systems, especially homeless people. And the rags to redemption process that Larry Haynes speaks of does not seem to square with the comments from many of the homeless themselves who have cycled in and out of Kramer, and paint a picture of the place as a heavy-handed, almost incarceration-like environment with an overbearing staff and an absentee management that, to the residents, appeared to value control over compassion, servitude over services, resulting in a dead end that for many led back to the streets.
Okay, here at an undisclosed park somewhere in Orange County, I'm talking with two ladies who are residents of what Supervisor Todd Spitzer, during the summer of 2018, referred to as the model shelter for all future shelters in Orange County, and that's Bridges at Kramer. How's that going for you?
Not good. It's horrible. It's absolutely horrible there. There's no safety. I don't feel safe. I don't feel. The food is horrendous. We get starch and sugar. That's what we live on, is starches and sugar. Mm-hmm. I'd say at least twice a week we get rice with pasta sauce or something over it, period. With maybe a 3 or 4 day old salad and a piece of bread,
Well, we did a walkthrough, Press did a walkthrough last summer, and it looked like they had pulled pork and
yeah, that's
out the back door.
Yeah,
that's not for us.
They cook it and it goes out the back door and we don't see it.
What do you mean out the back door?
It goes out the back door into a van and disappears out the gate.
They take it to some...
I have no idea where it goes.
You mean food meant for the clients in
that
there?
was supposed to be for us, yeah.
Is not.
No.
And so what are you getting generally? I mean, on a daily basis?
On a daily basis, we get junk. We get sugar, starch. Very seldom do we get any proteins or
no milk,
nutrients at all.
You can't get a glass of milk?
No. Never. They don't
if you're
ever
lucky
give you a glass
that
of
you
milk.
get this much milk in your cereal.
Not even enough to cover your cereal, if you're lucky enough to get cereal.
I see. How contrite are they in providing your medications on a daily basis?
They don't do anything as far as helping you with medications, medical care. They don't help you with anything. They basically warehouses.
No
That's
first aid kit.
They don't even have a first aid kit. They don't have a Band-Aid. They have no training, even basic first aid training. There's nothing.
Yeah.
Nothing.
So, Rona, I'm curious to know, who told you that it would be 8 to 10 years before you got permanent supported housing?
My navigator, Dion. Yeah, told me 8 to 10 years because I haven't been homeless long enough. I don't deserve to be before anybody else.
Okay. But 8 to 10 years is the number they said.
Yeah. Hell, I'll be 64, 65 years old by then.
Yeah.
And if you make it through
If
there
I even make it,
psychologically,
exactly.
That place, it's like psychological warfare. It really is. Mm. They play with your mind. They really do. Intentionally and maybe sometimes non-intentionally, they just don't care.
Yeah. So, Jody, I asked Rona if she had any plans for the future, and she was fairly stark about her response. Do you have any planned or hope, or do you feel anything that Kramer can offer you that will get you a leg up?
No, Kramer's not doing a darn thing for me. I am getting some type of assistance, hopefully sometime soon, through behavioral health, mental health, not through Kramer. Kramer has done nothing to help me in any way, shape, or form.
You're talking about the healthcare agency?
Yes.
Do you know of people that have successfully matriculated through Kramer and moved up and got some kind of housing in some other facility that was more personable?
In the 8 months I've been there, I've seen two people get housing in 8 months. That's it. And God only knows if they're still in it. So yeah, 2 people. And they have this wonderful number on the board, 161 people.
Housed, yeah.
Baloney.
That's a bunch of
2.
bullshit. It's been 2. We want to erase it and put 2 on there.
Yeah. So, what do you think of Supervisor, now District Attorney Todd Spitzer's statement that Kramer will be the model for all future shelters in Orange County?
That is a scary thought. It's a scary thought because they're causing more harm than good with these shelters that they're putting up. It's detrimental physically, psychologically, every way you can imagine. You know, we're being malnourished, we're being psychologically tortured, we're being exposed to all kinds of disease and filth, and there's nothing good about it. Nothing good. I think it's the worst. It's the worst thing I've ever experienced in my life, in my 56 years. That's for sure.
Yeah. You mentioned, last question. You mentioned that you know of. You know of 2 people who have moved up, moved on, and gotten some kind of positive result having moved through Kramer. Do you have any idea, could you speculate, having been there now 8 months, on how many people you've seen go the other way, back to the streets?
Oh God, hundreds. Hundreds. Without a doubt.
Today, Kramer Place generates far more washouts from its program than it advances to the more humane housing conditions the homeless were assured of when they signed on, a promise which remains largely unfulfilled and to many seems now less attainable than ever. Joe here spent several months at Bridges and hoped to turn his time there into a jumpstart to housing and a job.
Okay, outside of Mary's Kitchen on a warm afternoon, thankfully, we're talking with Joe, and like a lot of other folks out here from the riverbed, now points unknown,
yeah.
Let's say. But at one point, Joe, you were at Bridges at Kramer,
yes,
one of the, according to some people in this county, premier shelters that are offered by the county. And you were placed there. Tell me about your experience at Kramer.
My experience at Kramer was pretty much like being in prison. I mean, you got to ask for permission to leave, just do anything there. I mean, I was restricted from a lot of things, just going outside and smoking a cigarette. You know, you had to have somebody watching over you, some security guy, and it didn't feel very good. The cleanliness, it was bad. I had an incident where a man, you know, number 2 all over himself, and he was just laying there in his bed, and it smelled so bad that I went to staff with this problem, and actually I went to security first there, and they directed me towards the staff. When I approached the staff and told them what was going on, it smelled so bad it was just making me gag. Could they go over there and do something about it? And they told me there was nothing they could do about it. It was up to that man to clean up himself, and they were going to do nothing about it. And I got a little upset about that. I was like, you know, somebody needs to do something with this. I mean, they're all worried about hepatitis A on the riverbed, and we're just giving everybody shots, but in these shelters, it seems like they don't care if you got anything. There's no medical there. But
where was this in proximity to your bunk? Where was this guy that was incontinent?
He was just off to the, well, right of me, down on the bottom bunk. This man ended up, they weren't doing nothing about it. I got in conflict with the staff, telling them that they needed to do their job, and pretty much that means pick up the phone, call the paramedics, and they could take this man to a hospital and clean him up properly, you know, because they got places for that stuff in the hospitals to do that. And I was told that I just needed to be quiet and shut up, and I said, you know, the F word, screw you, you know, do your job. And they told me I'm out of there. They kicked me out of this place. And I was doing everything I was supposed to be doing.
So again, it's, in your mind, another, for all intents and purposes, incarceration situation.
It's exactly like that. It's funny how if you look at the fence around it, the barbed wire posts are pointed inward. That's to keep you from coming out, not going in. You know what I mean? And I find that a little scary. Yeah, I don't understand that reason. What if there's a big fire and you jump the fence, you know? I don't think they're concerned about us at all. That's what I think.
Okay. Thank you, Joe.
You're welcome.
Many, like Joe, are taking their chances on the streets now, playing a cat and mouse game with law enforcement wherever they have to, laying their heads down in safe places where they can find it. They say they will not return to what they view as vice-ridden shelters anytime soon.
Standing out on the corner, holding up your sign, or is it out on the corner? Raising my sign up in the air, is that me? When I glance down at the sign, I realize it says, oh, sale. Well, I know that isn't me. I'd rather make $1 or two if I could. Raise up a family and grow up in the neighborhood. That's me. That's me. Whoa. Whoa. Well, that is me. There we go. Do another tune.
That's one of my buddies.
Meet Eileen, here on the streets of Fullerton, where she spends her days. But at night, she goes to the National Guard Armory in Fullerton when it's open. Arriving just before sunset on one of the incoming shuttle buses, it's strictly a mat-on-the-floor affair. And then she's out again by 7 a.m. in the morning. They have their rules, and Eileen has made peace with them because this state facility offers her things she says she cannot get at the big county shelters. Things she values more than a bed.
Okay, with the Fullerton Armory in the background, I'm talking to Eileen, who uses the armory on a nightly basis.
Yes.
And actually prefers the armory to the shelters, where at least a couple of them you've been at. You've been at Kramer.
Been at Kramer.
And at Anaheim Way.
Anaheim Way and the Courtyard.
And the Courtyard.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how can the armory be better than the shelters?
To me, they're better because they're safer. There's more security around you 24/7. The other ones, you don't see security like this around you, and you don't feel as safe. And they have more amenities, but this one I like better because it's quieter and it's more controlled, and you don't hear dogs barking like at other shelters.
Yeah.
And it's not as junkies and all that. You don't have that as much.
Yeah, there are drugs at the shelters?
Sure. I mean, you know, it's homeless people. It's more of a gangish, ghettoish, jailish, druggish mentality.
Someplace like Kramer?
Yeah, in Anaheim Way. It's, yeah.
Okay.
That's how I looked at it, in my opinion. It was just more dangerous. Nothing happened to me, but you always have, like, as they say, one eye open when you're sleeping, so to speak.
Yeah.
You never know what can happen, and you don't know what they can put in the food. You don't know other things. You don't trust anybody there. It's a lot of noise. It's a lot of chaos. It's chaotic. It's dirty. There's a lot of problems with it. That a lot of less stress is here in the armory.
When an armory mat on a concrete floor can begin to look more attractive to a homeless person than a mass shelter bed and 3 squares a day, you know something at this shelter is going very wrong. Maybe it's been wrong from the start. Maybe the idea of cramming 200 or 400 already traumatized people into the tight quarters and dismal conditions of a big box shelter is more than a bad idea. Embedded in the big shelter concept is the inherent vice of its very size, and the statement that shelter size makes to the homeless themselves, that they are somehow damaged goods, only worthy of warehousing.
Is that the maximum that we could?
No one is more aware of this insult than the homeless themselves and the few who advocate for them.
The shelters are a travesty to human decency. The snail's pace in which people are permanently housed, as well as the pressure of living in shelters with inhumane conditions, ensure that the amount of people who have died waiting for permanent housing equals the amount of homeless who have been permanently housed. But maybe that has been your plan all along.
The next speakers.
I continue to hear about this great food program, which is non-existent, transportation, security. You have security guards in there carrying guns. I find that highly unacceptable. Not in that environment, not in any environment in Anaheim. And also, we keep talking about housing. There is no housing component for conversation. Therefore, you have a very expensive warehouse. Looking at other items.
In Orange County, I'm talking with Eve Guerra, who is a policy analyst and advocate for the American Civil Liberties Union of Southern California. Eve, you've just concluded a very controversial report on the state of the shelters as they exist today in Orange County, and you titled it with the very provocative opening title of "This Place is Slowly Killing Me." Can you begin by explaining the title of your report?
Well, that is actually a quote from a person who we got to know and we spoke with. Her name is Roberta, and she lived for a number of months at the courtyard. And she truly felt that living in this shelter was slowly killing her. Some of the information that we collected about these shelters shows that they can actually be quite dangerous places to live. They sort of warehouse extremely vulnerable people and sometimes abuse and neglect them. And people have reported that their health and well-being deteriorates until sometimes they either die or they're taken by ambulance to the hospital. So we feel that the title of the report is actually really descriptive of the experiences of many people who are living in these shelters.
In the summer of 2018, many of us in the press corps were shown the brand new and offshore shelters in Orange County, and that was a walkthrough of Bridges at Kramer Place, just off the 91 freeway, a county shelter that Supervisor Todd Spitzer at the time, now District Attorney Todd Spitzer, said would be the model for all future shelters in Orange County. Do you find that statement comforting or ominous?
Well, after having, spent a year investigating the Bridges at Kramer Place, I hope it's not a model for other shelters. We found some of the same issues with sanitation, with abuse of staff, verbal abuse, the neglect of elderly people and people with disabilities who sometimes were left to just lie in their own feces while staff members ignored the issue. that is criminal neglect. I mean, yes. I mean, we have several interviews, multiple interviews with different people, sometimes about the same situation. And, you know, we stand by our findings that, you know, that this happens not just at Bridges at Kramer Place, at Safe Place, and also at the courtyard. Oftentimes what happens is the residents themselves come to the aid of one another because they're friends. They live together. You know, they're roommates or bunkmates, and they take care of one another in the absence of any of you know, the care by shelter staff. So no, I don't think that Bridges at Kramer Place is a model. Moreover, as I mentioned before, we really need, you know, much higher standards to protect some of the most vulnerable people in society who have no choice but to use these shelters and are being abused and neglected inside of them. We need higher standards, and we need a system to hold the shelter operators accountable to those standards.
Would you go so far as to say that in many cases, the shelters, the mass shelters that you studied in your report, actually re-traumatize people who've already been traumatized many times on the streets already?
Yes. I mean, I'll just give you a couple of examples.
The County of Orange, which is directly responsible for the mass shelter concept, and the 3 big shelters Guerra's ACLU team investigated, did respond, belatedly, to the allegations of neglect and abuse at their shelters with a categorical public denial, saying, quote, "The complaints contained in the report are unfounded, have already been remedied, or are in the process of being remedied," unquote. Despite the almost incarceration-level restrictions on access to these shelters, the prohibitions on the complaint processes, or even the taking of pictures inside the facilities, a number of outraged residents of each of the shelters in question have managed to come forward to document and speak out on their conditions and treatment while inside these shelters at their own peril.
He just threatened me.
Okay, stop recording me!
Callie Rudder, who took this video inside the Kramer shelter, has been a relentless reality check on the state of abuses at the big shelters today. Refusing to be bullied or silenced, she assures us even after the ACLU report documented a litany of abuses, these same abuses still persist. No problem? We had some problems. Everything's fixed now. We're all back to normal. And you folks are residents currently at Kramer. Is everything okay there?
Absolutely not. No. Absolutely not. It is disgraceful.
Yeah, okay, let's break that down a little bit. Disgraceful in the sense of, are people being violated? I mean, even constitutionally, they're still.
Constitutionally, I have been violated. I have seen others been violated, both constitutional, human rights, and otherwise. We are verbally abused. Some have been probably physically abused. My First Amendment, Fourth Amendment, 8th and 14th Amendment have been, abused. I've been made to delete pictures that I've been taken inside the shelter itself, been made to do that by security. And when I spoke with the program director and showed my paperwork to the ACLU, I did not sign away my rights to take a picture within Kramer, within the shelter or warehouse, because that's all it is a warehouse.
Callie, why do you suppose they're so sensitive to the residents taking their own pictures?
Because they don't want the public to see what we lived through. And I believe partially that's through rhetoric and hate speech. I believe that a bigger part of it is blowing the whistle on these guys. They are bad people. Most of them are bad people. They're dealing drugs to the clients or guests.
Are we talking about staff members?
Yes, we're talking about staff members and security dealing drugs, bringing them into Kramer itself and selling them to the clients that do have drug problems. It's a low barrier shelter, meaning they don't drug test. So you could come in if you wanted, high as a kite.
You were talking earlier about a bed bug epidemic.
Yes.
Through the building, it swept through the place. And what did they do about it?
They did nothing.
Has this been recently?
This was probably right when we got there, about 2 months ago. Michelle got bit with bed bugs, and she took them up, and we verified they were bed bugs. And I tried to tell Danetta, who is one of the leads on her shift. I said I had read everything that on the internet about bed bugs to try to figure out what Michelle had, and we figured out it was bed bugs. So I went to find out what kills them, and you need a special type of not just any insect repellent will kill them. It has got to be a bed bug killer. And so I tried to explain that to Danetta, and she said, "Oh, you've told me all I need to hear," and just blew me off.
Does staff acknowledge that they have a bed bug epidemic there?
Somebody else had them, and they had cleared out maybe 12 bunks, and that's when they had zapped. They had zapped them with this thing that kills them, but it kills them on the clothes. What it is it's a zapper that kills the stuff on the clothes, but it doesn't address the eggs that are all over the mattress and all over everything else. So the bed bugs just stay, they hatch again, and they continue doing what they're doing.
Yeah. And this is still the situation there?
Yeah.
Okay.
There's a lot of people there that won't come forward that have bed bugs because they're embarrassed, because they made fun of Michelle for having them. They called her the bug lady and this and that, and made fun of her like children.
Bradley also is a homeless resident of Bridges at Kramer Shelter, along with his wife Michelle, of whom he speaks, helpless to assist her in her seemingly endless battle with shelter bed bugs, which have left her physically and emotionally scarred. A lifelong couple who, as is often the case at these shelters, were separated upon entry at Kramer, even though they were told they could go in as a couple. In a separate interview with Michelle, she talks about the general medical conditions at Kramer, her forced separation from Bradley, and of her hopes for the future and the uncertainties of the shelter. Okay, I'm talking to Michelle. Michelle is actually Bradley's wife and also a resident of Bridges at Kramer Place. We were talking to your husband, Michelle Bradley, previously. Things are not going too well at Kramer, I understand. There's contamination, there's illness. You yourself are not well. It's something about community-acquired pneumonia. You've gotten it yourself, is that right?
Yes, I do.
And where do you think it came from?
From Kramer.
How so?
Well, being on the streets since approximately 2007, I haven't had nearly a flu. I don't get colds very easily, but the minute I walked in there, I had been sick since I've been there, and my husband as well.
Okay. Do you, the two of you, husband and wife, do you have a plan for getting out of Kramer, and what would that look like for you? Have you thought about it?
We have. We'd like to live together and be together instead of separated.
Yeah. You are somewhat separated at Kramer.
We just get to eat together. We can't. You're not allowed to hold hands. You're not allowed to embrace each other arm in arm. You're not allowed to hug each other couple-wise. You're not allowed to kiss for a long period of time. You're not allowed to sit very close. I can't sit on his leg, or we don't sleep by each other at all.
You're not allowed
basically eat together. That's it.
You're not allowed to hold hands?
Not for a very long period of time. No.
That's got to be hard.
Very hard.
What would you like to have happen for you and Bradley at this point? What would be a good plan for the two of you? Where would you like to go? What would you like to see happen in this system?
I'd like us to have our own little place, just a little place called ours.
Are you expecting placement? Are you expecting to be housed by Kramer?
I'm expecting, yes, I'm hoping so. I pray for it. I pray for it to happen.
Do you think it will happen? Do you expect it to happen under the circumstances?
I don't know if it's possible, but like I said again, I pray every day. That's all you can do.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Okay, Michelle, thank you very much for the interview.
Thank you.
Michelle's shelter stay and her hopes for a life with Bradley beyond the shelters would be cut short at Kramer. Chronic illness, declining into substance abuse while at the shelter, and despondency, no doubt, over her separation from Bradley took her life early at 49. After nearly 8 months in the women's-only dorm at Kramer facility, Michelle passed away in her bunk alone.
See the world down on hallway floors, heads bowed to the cold. Time hangs on each breath that's drawn for those that life disowns. Homeless, homeless, faces without names.
Michelle was not the first among the homeless to succumb to the mass shelters. Others have preceded her. Their numbers are often obscured behind official jargon like no fixed abode or the mislabeling of cause of death, and also a shelter culture of coercion that intimidates the homeless from speaking out while sequestered behind closed doors and locked gates. But the homeless themselves know who the dead are and why they died. They note their passings in remembrances like this longest night ceremony every December, because remembering is all the homeless have.
Homeless, homeless, faces without names. Homeless, homeless, inside we're all the same.
Almost as tragic as those who succumb to the confines of the mass shelters are those who are left behind to slowly waste away in the shelter systems of Orange County, in some cases for years. For them, the shelters have become a dead-end destination. Steve is one such shelter resident who has languished at the Kramer facility for over 2 years now, receiving little assistance, he says, from Kramer's so-called shelter navigators in moving him up to some kind of transitional housing he's been seeking since he got there.
They told me 2 years ago when I first got there I would have housing in 3 months.
Okay.
But it never happened.
And it's been how long?
2 years and almost 4 months.
2 years and 4. So you were really one of the first people.
Yeah, I
in there.
was. They opened on the 5th. I got there on the 7th.
Okay. And that was when your bride Kelly was
Still alive.
And how long were you with Kelly?
33 years.
That must have been really hard.
It was very hard. She died in January of 2018.
So you were promised, you and Kelly both?
Yes, promised housing in 3 months.
All right. And for both of you, were they?
Yes. And the first navigator we went to was showing us apartments in Las Vegas. That navigator left. I got a new navigator and he had different ideas.
Okay.
But none of the navigators have ever done anything for me as far as finding my COC.
What is the COC?
Shelter Plus.
Okay, so your navigator really wasn't.
He didn't do it.
Very supportive at all.
They don't do anything for you. They tell you things to do.
There are homeless like Steve at every mass shelter in Orange County now, stalled and stranded by a system of care that, for all of its talk about supportive and transitional housing for homeless like Steve, has actually allowed a net reduction in its permanent supportive housing stock. And that is according to the county's own 2019 point-in-time count, in which emergency shelter beds increased by almost 121%, while transitional housing inventory actually decreased. It seems the county's so-called continuum of care plan appears to prefer herding and warehousing the homeless en masse into off-site locations like bridges at Kramer, instead of building real bridges of hope for the homeless with supportive housing programs. Some of these shelters even call their homeless residents, conferring a certain permanence to their condition. In others, they are the clients, or even, euphemistically, guests. Bridges at Kramer homeless guests, Callie and Bradley, have another word for the growing number of homeless holed up now in mass shelters like Kramer. Are there people there at Kramer that you know to have been there for a long time? Many months or maybe even years?
I know somebody that's been there 2 years. And I know another one that's been there a year and 8 months.
Yeah. Callie, how about, have you run across anybody like that?
Yes. A gentleman just 2 days ago was out having coffee and he's like, oh, it's my 2-year anniversary. And I thought he meant for sobriety. And he actually meant for his intake date at Kramer. So it's not unusual for a guest. A guest is just a horrible word to use in this context, in this situation.
What word would you use?
Hostage. I feel like I'm being held hostage. I'm being told where I can go to smoke.
So what's wrong with a shelter like Kramer?
Okay, Kramer, people that have anxiety or mental health stuff, even people that don't have mental health, to stick someone in a place with 60 people in a room all together in one spot. If you're all about love, peace, and tranquility, that's not what you're gonna get when you have a bunch of people in one place sharing things and whatever. It's just not conducive to having a good place to live. Them talking today about semi-private or whatever it is housing, that might help some. But none of us want to go and be a foot away from someone on the cot next to you with their dirty socks or whatever. You know, we want to be treated civilly, or we're not animals. You know, it feels like they like.
If if they came up to you and said, look, Lacey, we found that list again with your name on it, and for shelter or for housing, would you go?
Yes, I would definitely go. But what I've noticed, what they're trying to do is just put us all at some one Cambridge or Bridges or whatever, and that straight looks like a straight jail. I mean, why do we have to go into like a jail at night? That messes with our head even more. I mean, I know, I don't know. I'll be able to go into what they have promised, and that is housing, period. Some kind of housing, not just putting us in some shelter where we can only take one bag of stuff and we have to get rid of our animals. That's not right. I mean, we're people.
If City Net pulled up right now and said, "Hey, Paul, we got placement for you at Kramer," right now, would you go?
Because my wife's there, yes, but if she weren't there, then no, because I've already been there, been that route. For me, it was a waste of time.
You've seen Kramer, you've been in there.
Been there, done that, and not going to do it again because it was unproductive and a total waste of time. Sorry, I bought into it, and it, for me, didn't work out.
Okay, thank you, Paul.
You bet.
Somewhere along the line, housing first, as a compassionate policy toward the homeless, became big shelters first, as a quick fix for a decade of county neglect. But embedded in the one-size-fits-all mass shelter model, it appears there are certain inherent vices that invariably emerge when you treat people like damaged merchandise to be delivered and stored in warehouses, stacked like cordwood, subjected to inhumane conditions, punitive policies, lack of recuperative support and medical services, subjected to bugs and drugs under the negligent watch of an ill-trained and sometimes complicit workforce. And then there's something else. Many of the homeless who suffer confinement, abuse, and re-traumatization at the hands of the big shelters endure it for months, even years, because they were told there would be supportive housing with wraparound services on the other side of it. The biggest blow for those who entered these mass shelters with the hope and expectation of housing to come was the slow realization that there was little by way of available housing beyond the shelters waiting for them. They are still waiting.